Okay, we are going to get started. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight to our public 5A Tabor Timeout public meeting. I'm Brandy Blankenship. I'm your Community Relations Manager. And we felt that this was a good time to have a public meeting and give some more information about the aquatic facility and the 5A Tabor funds. I have handouts on a lot of the chairs, so I think you guys have that. I have some extras on the table. But just to kind of give a little bit of an overview, we'll do review of the 5A ballot language. Christian's going to go over that and try to help clear up any miscommunication or any misunderstanding of what the voters actually voted on in 2016. Then we're going to do funding breakdown and go over the 5A Tabor money, and then restricted and reserved money and capital money. So Christian will do that. Then a spending summary, and I do have all of that information in those handouts of what we have spent year to date. And then Carol's going to talk about the Aquatic Center project update, because there has been movement on that as far as the board narrowing down 2 locations and kind of going over all of the most up-to-date information on that. And then at the end, we will have an open forum, and this is where you can give just general feedback, or if you feel that we maybe didn't answer a lot of your questions. Christian is going to stop and ask if there's any questions, anything that he has gone over that might need further clarification. So with that, I'll introduce Christian Hine, our district manager, and Carol Cosby, she's our director of Parks and Recreation. And thank you both for doing this meeting with us tonight.
So I'm Christian J. Hine. I'm the district manager for Pueblo West. I want to say thank you all for coming. It's actually a really great turnout. I appreciate that people came out, whether you have questions or you just want to learn more information. Tonight is very much informational. It's intended to provide information, clear up any misinformation or anything that you may have heard that may be not either correct or there has been confusion in the past about. There'll be opportunities for questions, and there'll be opportunities for probably a little bit of feedback or conversation during this. With that, we are live streaming so that folks can watch this afterwards. So I appreciate phones off or anything that might distract. Appreciate that. When we get to question sections, we will ask if you could come up to the mic here, just so that way folks at home, either watching now or in the future, will be able to hear your question as we have that conversation. Brandy did a great job outlining it. Carol here is our director of Parks and Rec. She's been here a few years more than I have, and has a lot of history with the Parks and Recreation Department, all the services that the district has provided. She's taken this project since pretty much 2016 in its inception towards where we are today. So I'll cover a lot of information on the broad strokes and provide information, and then I'll hand it off to her to talk a lot about what the project is and where it's at today. First, quick, I think, history and just some important facts I want to make sure people hear a little bit about. One, we are a metropolitan district. We provide specific services. One of those is parks programs or parks and rec programs. With that, in our 1972 revised service plan, it does call out specifically an Olympic-sized swimming pool in there as something it was intending to provide. So there has been a pool envisioned for Pueblo West since its inception. As you know, there is an outdoor pool now. In 2016, or maybe even before that, I can't speak to all the conversation that happened then, but I do know that a question came forward about, with Tabor and with additional funding, would it make sense to be able to reserve some of that funding to be able to use for a specific project that we're able to? And at that time, based on conversations in the board, they decided to refer a ballot measure to the voters to see if they would allow us to reserve that funding for specific purposes that I'll read here in that ballot language, generally considered the Aquatic Center indoor pool funding. And so that specific ballot that was voted on in 2016 states, without increasing any tax rate or imposing any new tax, shall Pueblo West Metropolitan District be permitted to collect, retain, and spend all revenue it receives in the year 2017, continuing for 10 fiscal years through December 31st, 2026, as a voter-approved revenue change and property tax revenue change under Article 10, Section 20 of the Colorado Constitution, and to exceed the 5.5% property tax revenue growth limitation contained in Section 29, Tact 1, Tact 301, the Colorado Revised Statutes, and any other revenue limitation contained in the laws of the state, utilizing all of the excess revenue over said limits for the sole purpose of funding the design, construction, maintenance, or lease of a community pool and aquatic facility. That was the ballot language that was posed November of 2016. That was approved, and it was, I think, a narrow margin. It's actually also posted in the back. We keep all our ballot language there, so we're easy to reference. And we understand even hearing that language tonight, or over the course of the last 8 or 9 years, there's been a lot of different interpretations, questions, conversation about exactly what did those words mean. But that is the limitation. So it's most accurate to say, based on that language, the only purposes we can use that funding for is contained within that language. So I know there have been conversations, if this didn't get enough money, could we use it for roads? Could we use it for something else? It is very limited to those specific purposes. And even after the ballot or the Tabor restriction sunsets in 2026, that funding still exists for that sole purpose unless a new ballot language or a new ballot would be referred to be able to use it for anything else. So answering that, I'll actually stop for a second and ask, are there any questions specific about the ballot language? Okay, that one's an easy one. So moving into the funding, that I cannot speak to whether the board at that time knew how much they anticipated per year or knew even on the onset how much an indoor pool and aquatic center might cost. Unfortunately, it wasn't there. Minutes do not reflect a lot of what that conversation may have looked like as far as the granularity of, was that going to be enough? Were we going to need to supplement with more funding? I do think it became more clear over time. And what I'll ask Brandy to pull up, we'll go into the breakdown of how much funding has been received through the measure along with additional funding. I think if you scroll down and hit the KPI, that's fun. Hit chart options. Scroll up. Can you edit? Okay. And if you scroll up just a little bit, actually that looks perfect. And you go a little bit down. Oh, might have to go into it. Let me see. One pause.
Yeah.
So on the screen, you have a chart that goes over a little bit of the history, and this is a work in progress. Oh, I'm gonna have to start over on the mic. So what you'll see on the screen is a chart. It's a bit of a work in progress, talking about over time how much funding we've collected and where that funding has come from. So if you follow on the greenish block or bar graph of it, that's the actual restricted funding that comprises the Tabor excess and what was a little bit of CTF or Conservation Trust Fund funding that we got early on. In the early years, going back to the audits, a little less clear, 2016, 2017, how they're breaking it out. The numbers are much more clear and consistent with what we know today about 2023, 2024, and 2025, including 2022. So if you look at the green, and what you're not seeing right there is this caps out at about 9 million and some change, and the total project cost has been estimated in that $9 to $10 million range for just indoor pool, essentially some of the facilities, looking at the lap pool and the locker facilities, a lot of things that go with it. It's not including the leisure area as that phase one that Carol will go more into. But just talking about the funding right now, you're going to see the green was not going, even in the next couple of years, to approach that $9 to $10 million figure. The Tabor excess alone was not going to be enough to capture the total cost of what the project was. Historically, the district, particularly between, I think, 2018 to 2022, we did a fiscal sustainability study to determine what did it look like for the district long-term to support all the services it was providing, meaning its fire, its parks and rec, water, sewer, mostly focusing on some of the general fund services, at the time roads, and I identified pretty quickly that the district was actually in an unsustainable model. So from 2018 to about 2021, the district was operating knowing it had to make major cuts, find new revenue, do something to right that. Because of that, and especially early on, you're not seeing a lot of additional funds contributed to that total project outside of what the Tabor excess was. And at one point, the board did commit 30% of any MJ or marijuana excise tax towards funding the project as well. But even with that, which is represented in the orange for that committed fund, it wasn't approaching the actual numbers needed to be able to fund the project. And because we were unsustainable, it was unlikely this project was going to get a lot of funding. So we heard, and I think to this day, still hear a lot of feedback that this project looked like it was never going to get off the ground. There was going to be major funding or major partnerships or contributors needed to be able to get that to where it even needed to be for phase one. And then some things did change. That fiscal sustainability study did show some things we could do or refer to the voters to see if they could help and right a little bit of the ship when it came to the sustainability issue. One of those was a 1% sales tax for the fire department. And another was either a mill levy increase, which is property tax, a sales tax, or some other solution to get what was essentially a large amount of expenses being spent towards fixing roads within Pueblo West. That in and of itself was a large project that was demanding a lot more of the revenue from Pueblo West than had been envisioned within its original mill levy, because it wasn't actually a service that the district was in its service plan supposed to provide. So it's collecting all this revenue. It should go to fire, should go to parks, should go to administration, but we added this huge debt because now we were taking care of roads, and the agreement we used to have wasn't enough to cover all the actual road work required, which only provided so much funding from the county. So a lot of context to that. But the most important part is that when it came to about 2021 to 2023 is when a lot of those things came into place. The 1% sales tax for the fire department passed. We worked with Pueblo County to talk about a transition plan for those roads to go back to Pueblo County. That is also where the 1% sales tax for roads came from with 6C. And that transition happened about 4 years ahead of schedule in 2023. So with that, we found ourselves in a position where the district is not just sustainable, the revenue is enough to be able to support projects such as the Aquatic Center as we're building a better fund balance over time. And so what you're seeing in that, there was in 2023, staff recognized that previous practices of how we were appropriating and budgeting and forecasting for the Tabor excess ahead of the budget schedule. And then after an audit was complete a year later, determining what the actuals were, found that we actually had overassigned some of the funding to the Aquatic Center project. We caught that mistake in 2023, corrected it, and you're still seeing the assigned funding additional in that purple that's with that. Going forward, the yellow, in 2025 represents an unassigned balance within the capital project fund. So as we were looking at projects, for instance, for roads, going into 2023 before that transition actually occurred, there was funding that was taken from the general fund and put in the capital project fund to do for a road project. It was never spent because of the transition with Pueblo County. So there was additional available funding for projects in the capital project fund that now exists there. And in this budget cycle going into 2026, recognizing it exists there, the question will come before the board to assign it to the Aquatic Center, which brings that total to about $9 million. So real quick, so I can actually read it. The general numbers for Tabor excess and the CTF is about 3.8 million. For the 30% MJ excise is about 1 million. The assigned funding to the project from that duplicate is about 1.2 million. And the additional funding available that we can assign to this project going into 2026 is about 3.1 million, bringing us a little above 9 million. And what the project is anticipated with contingencies, with the phase one in total to cost right now in 2024's numbers at the very least, about 8.9 million. So there's still a question of going into 2025, 2026, potentially 2027. And I'll talk a little bit about the timing when we get to talking about the progress to date. We're essentially have achieved a lot of those markers of the cost we expect, and we are forecasting in the future years that that fund balance will continue to preserve a way to transfer more funding to this project. These things do go before the board for final approval as part of the budget process, so it is going to be a question of, is this still that priority of that project for it? But this goes over a little bit of that funding to date and where that fund balance is currently. I'll stop there. That was a lot of information, and I hope I didn't talk too fast, but I'll open up if there are any questions specific for the funds to date.
And I just wanted to add the handout that you have The money that we have listed is the for sure funding. So it's that 3.8 million in the restricted funds, the 1 million in the committed funds, which is that 30% marijuana, and then the 1.2 million in the capital project. That's assigned funding. So that extra 3 million that Christian is talking about, that's unassigned, and that would go through the board of directors. So I didn't put it on that handout for you, but that is just something that you should know that the board is talking about.
So there really are other things though that.
Do you mind, I'm sorry, just for the public, I'm so sorry, Sandra. I know. You don't have to, just questions. Fine.
So that extra money that you're talking about really could be going to something else.
It could, so.
For instance, if the fire doesn't get their money, or if Carol doesn't get the money that she talked about at the last meeting to repair the pool you have now, or whatever else, or the building. So it's depending upon whether you want to rob Peter to pay Paul. Where is that money going to go? Is it necessarily important to assign it to the pool?
It's a fair question, so it will be up to the board of directors to finalize. Right now, within our, and it's a great point that you bring up, we have a strategic plan that identifies 14 priorities, from water rates being number 1 to the covenant enforcement being number 14, and outlines them. Number 2 on that list, to your point, is the fire sales tax, or the fire department funding permanency. And just, it won't be tonight's topic, but it brings up a great point of why these conversations take place, is that we've identified that the fire sales tax is also on a time limit. It has a 10-year sunset date. It was 2020 to 2030, thank you. So it started in 2021, went for the 10 years, and it was intended to fund the construction of Fire Station 2, additional firefighters, and some things that were allowed within that ballot language to continue spending that money on. The issue is that the fire department, when it comes to funding personnel, that's its largest operational expense, and we hired at least 15 additional firefighters with that funding. So if that funding goes away, now we have to take that operational footprint of a new station with the firefighters and figure out how to fit it into the general fund, which comes about $2.6 million right now that the fire department's 6A fund is funding just on that side of the house. So to a very good point is, if we were to build an aquatic center and we were or an indoor pool and try to staff and run it, and it's not self-sufficient, it's likely going to be another additional cost or debt for the district to be able to continue maintaining while also taking that on. And the question come up is, do we move forward with building that, knowing that that other issue, that other shoe to drop when it comes to the fire department funding permanency exists. So that's why the fire department funding permanency is number 2 on that list. Resolving that is pretty critical to ensure the overall fund balance and the overall sustainability of the district is still capable to do that. And it's why that takes precedence over essentially construction and operations of an aquatic center. So I would offer, and it's obviously a board decision, it would be unlikely we would recommend moving forward with an aquatic center if we were still waiting for the fire department to figure out if that's going to be permanent. Now, as far as could that money be used for other things that unassigned 3.1, yes, it could. The question that will be before the board is, if they have that funding, what do they want to do with it? Based on the last board and identifying those desired end states as part of the strategic plan, the aquatic center indoor pool did come up, and this is probably the largest project on that list where that money could be used for at this time.
Well, the other thing that we don't know is, if you build this, are you going to be able to maintain it? I mean, no one that I know of has come up with a solid plan or idea as to what the expenses would be to operate this. I mean, what's it going to cost for the utilities? What's it going to cost for hiring lifeguards and snack people and
Sure.
maintenance and everything that goes into it? We have no idea where that money's going to come from.
To be fair, we don't have a final idea yet. We have done an initial estimate and an internal analysis of it. So
We have an initial, the one that Brian Axworthy did?
No. We have an external one that somebody did for us to say, hey, and it's what she's pulling up right now.
Oh, okay.
What the expense estimate is. Then we've done, do you want to?
No, go ahead.
Okay. And then we've done an internal analysis comparing to other aquatic centers or like projects to see what is their return on investment. How much money were they making based on their membership compared to their expenses? The general average was about 60% return on investment, which means that they have to find about 40% subsidizing essentially from some place to that. With this, it's about, I think, $1 million at most, at high, for what it would take to operate the aquatic center. If we think of that as 40% is what we're gonna have to contribute, that would be sustainable so long as 6A is permanent. So long as the fire department doesn't become an issue where we're trying to find that funding within the general fund, it is sustainable. So we have done that initial estimate, or sorry, external estimate and internal analysis to determine that.
Is the idea that you would charge people for using the pool?
Ultimate, I think, approval will go to the board of directors. I've heard two concepts. One is a membership plan that includes both residential and non-residentials, where probably reduced rate for residentials. I have heard conversations about making it free for residents, but charge for external. So there have been both of those conversations, and I think we'll have to talk with the board to get their final approval. And it'll probably be based a little bit on the sustainable models.
Okay.
Great questions, though. Thank you. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Nope.
Are there any questions about the overall funding over time? Okay. So just talking about funds being spent thus far, the only thing that has been approved was a contract for design, and they have been working on design. It's been about $745,000 that was approved to spend for that design. Up to date, it's been about $445,000 that has been spent on the design itself. So if there were modifications to the project or the design itself, we would have to probably go back to the board to make sure if it exceeded that $745,000. But to date, that's what's been spent. I know that was its own section. That was much quicker. Are there any questions about that one? Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Carol, who's going to do a much better job of talking. And she's going to talk a little bit about the progress to date, where we're at with the aquatic center, and talk a little bit about how we got here.
So, Carol Cosby, I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation. I have been here a little time, a little bit more longer than Christian. Currently, the indoor pool, we've taken to the board 5 different sites of locations where we could put the pool. The board chose 2 of those sites to do further groundwork and to see some soil sampling on how the soil is there. So it will be sustainable and won't cost us more in the future. The 2 sites, one is located on the north side of the highway. It's on Assembly and McCulloch. And the second site is on John Powell and McCulloch. Both sites are large enough so that if we phase this out, phase 1 would be, and we can add on with phase 2. They're large enough to do that. They're also large enough in the future to do other park amenities in that area. So that is where we're at right now. We are having, we're bringing in someone outside of the district to come in and do a soil analysis on both those sites. We're also looking at doing a phase. Phase 1 would include the 6-lane lap pool. It would include locker rooms, the pump room, anything that would have to go with the pool itself. The front entrance, area around the pool. Then the second phase would include the leisure pool, the slide, and the party rooms. That was the whole facility itself. This is a fabricated building. Do you have pictures of that, Brandy? Great. That would be the outside of the facility as it was designed at the beginning. It would be a 17,000 square foot building with, again, the 6-lane pool. You could see the leisure pool. There's one lap lane. There's a lazy river that has a reverse current. Play area for with spray features, and then the slide, of course. Phase 1, if you're looking at this picture, would be the whole left side where the 6-lane is, and it's kind of divided in half, so when we build it, that we could add on that second phase. I'm losing it here. This is a 6-lane pool. It does have a 0 depth handicap lane all the way into the pool that actually would be an area that would be almost a 7th lane into that pool. So there's definite accessibility into this facility. And this is the leisure pool. Again, it is also 0 depth, and then it goes to 3.5 feet. The slide is on the outside, and then the lazy river is up in the top corner. It's hard to see up there. Again, original phase would be what you're seeing right there. And Christian went over the cost of that original phase. That is kind of where we're at right now with the pool. And we've worked really hard to get to where we're at right now. So are there any questions that I can answer?
How long is it going to be before they get the soil samples?
Right now, we're working with our designer to bring that firm on, the firm that's going to do the soil samples. I don't know that I have an actual time frame on that. I'm hoping by the end of this year, sir. Oh,
Yeah, we'll try this. As long as the question is something we can easily repeat, we'll repeat it for the group if you ask it to us.
Is the idea that you would make a decision on this before the money is spent to repair the current pool, which seems to be having a lot of difficulty? So would that money, would you be spending money on the current pool to repair it?
So the question is,
Before you know what you're doing with this?
the question is, would we finalize our plans for the aquatic center and money we're spending there before we determine costs associated with the outdoor pool and what we might be doing with that? Fair?
Right.
Okay. I'll share, I think that we're going to find more information out about the outdoor pool, which as many people know was closed this summer due to failures potentially in the line that have been thus starting becoming identified for it. Pending costs for that, all that information will be provided to the board to evaluate how they would like to proceed. They could decide, for instance, and this isn't the only options they could consider, they could decide to forego any work on the outdoor pool in favor of finalizing and dedicating all funding to the indoor pool, the phase 1 of this. They could decide to delay this project to start with the outdoor pool and try to fix that, or they could hybrid or try to find ways to do both at the same time. I have heard some conversation. I can't speak for the board or individual board members, but I do know some of the concerns that come up is, are we going to have both of those operational at the same time? Is that actually the intent? Versus, is there going to be a conversation of converting the outdoor pool into something like a outdoor splash pad or some other project for it? We do recognize that going down at the same time that this has yet to be constructed brings a concern for future years. Are there going to be that summer activity if we're waiting for this? So it's a fair question, and I think it's something we'll have to discuss with our board. Is that fair?
Go ahead, the gentleman in the back.
I was just wondering what the capacity is for phase 1, like how many people are we gonna line up and
Question was, what is the capacity for phase 1?
The capacity for phase 1 will probably, I didn't bring that with me, but I'm going to say the capacity for that pool will probably be about 200 people.
I have a couple of questions. Ms. Crosby?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Now the time to get up and ask them?
If-
Would you rather be home at all?
Are they specific for what we've covered so far?
Specific to the existing swimming
Do you want to wait for?
Yeah, let's wait on that, Larry, and we'll call you up. Do you have
Well-
any, I think you had raised your hand.
Yeah, where's the water coming from? I saw an informational sheet you have out there, and you have a problem with water now.
In other words, you're saying that you built at 65% capacity here in Pueblo West, and you're running into problems where you're gonna get water for any kind of more housing and people. So in other words, we're running out of water. We're running short of water.
So,
Looking at a pool and the amount of usage, any kind of pool, you talk to anybody, I've had commercial, I've had private, they're nothing but a money sucker all the time, and not that many people are gonna use it. I don't know, I think it ought to at least go back to a vote for the people again, before we keep putting money down a rabbit that you can't get back out. You've got enough problems at Pueblo West with everything else, with adding something that's just an absolute drain on the income.
So the general question was, what about the water? The indoor pool is going to consume, obviously, water, use water to maintain its operational status when the Pueblo West is already, let's say, water stars when it comes to full build out. For the water needed to make sure that we have it for anybody who wants to build out in the existing tracts, lands, and a concern of should we not spend that money or spend time towards making that operational, understanding whether the pool itself is not self-sufficient, funding itself, versus it's also a drain on the water system. I think you had facts. A little bit of
Yeah,
information.
the pool will hold about 300,000 gallons of water. An average pool loses about a 1/4 inch a day per evaporation. Also, there's a lot of ways to, with water loss, taking care of that pool. The way pools lose water is through splash out. All the kids splashing goes on the deck. So basically, making sure that when it's designed, it reuses that water that is splashed out. Also, backwashing, how many times a day we backwash. Currently in the outdoor pool, we do backwash quite a bit, just because of the older system. However, with the newer systems that they come with, backwashing is flushing the filters out. With better filters, that won't happen as much. And also the other one was draining for maintenance. And looking that up, generally pools are drained every 3 to 7 years. So we're looking at, we'd fill the pool with 300,000 gallons of water, and that would be full phase out. That would be both phases together. That wouldn't be just phase one. Phase one is about 200,000 gallons. That's how much will go in the first phase of the pool,
And just
on
to-
an average.
Just to add to that, in that strategic plan, the number one priority right now is water rights, recognizing that Pueblo West requires more water resources to see that full build out, to be able to allow for, whether it's commercial, residential, any of those, to be able to connect. Right now, we're going through a water analysis, both a raw water analysis and a rate analysis, to review how much water do we have, how much water is available for future connections. And I think it will be a matter to be able to discuss as we identify that this pool will have costs associated or operational water loss. Is that going to be something valued as an amenity for the community, in the hope that it also is going to operate with some revenue to fill back towards the costs it has? Is that the value for it? So I think it is a fair point to bring up. It's not to say that that is going to be something that, as far as the water available, whether it's going to be evaluated compared to other projects or other commercial projects that could happen. But I think it is going to be something on our mind as we confirm, is this a project we're going to move forward with? Fair question.
$1 million estimated operating cost, is that just phase one or is that phase one and phase two?
That is phase one and phase two.
So the question there was the $1 million.
I'm sorry.
You're okay.
Sorry.
got
I forgot
you.
to do that.
Is the $1 million operating cost just phase one or phase one and phase two? And Carol politely provided, it is phase one.
Both phases.
Never mind,
Both
it is
phases.
both phases.
Both phases. That's the whole project.
Whole project. Go ahead.
Does the money that's already been collected just sit indefinitely in account until enough money is raised to do something? Is there like use it or lose it? Does it ever go to the general fund? What happens to it?
So the question is, the money being raised, the restricted TABOR funding, does that sit in that fund? Is it allowed to be used for anything else? Is it use it or lose it? The TABOR restricted can only be used for the specific costs associated with that ballot language there. So after it sunsets in 2026, if it's not used for any project, it essentially sits there until probably one of two things happen. Either a new ballot is issued to allow that to be used for a different purpose, or it would ultimately be returned to the voters, as that is what is normally done when you don't have that restriction in place or that restriction lifted. Any of the additional funding, meaning the committed by the board for the marijuana excise tax, the assigned funding or the unassigned funding, the board can make determinations on those funds to use them for other projects at their discretion. Go ahead.
The first phase, how big is the first pool Olympic size?
No. The pool, sorry. The question was, the first phase, is the pool Olympic size? The answer to that is no. Whether it's phase one or phase two, there is not an Olympic size pool here. This pool is a 25-yard pool with 6 lanes in it. So it is just a regular size swimming pool. What you're talking about, Olympic pool, is a 50-meter pool. And that is not feasible for our community.
The only thing I would add to that is, I think the overall project size, scope, square footage is about 17 or 18,000. Phase 1 is about 12,000. It's missing
Yes.
about 6,000 from that leisure pool section.
Correct.
So this was roughly 75 feet long?
It will be, what the question is this about 75 feet long? This pool will be about 84 by 42.
So it's about half the size of
It's a little bigger than the outdoor pool.
an Olympic pool is 125 by 84. So we're 84 by 42. So 2/3 of an Olympic pool.
The only Olympic pool that is in an area close to us, I believe, is at the Air Force Academy.
I'm just trying to get the size.
And that's about the size, and all I can say is it will be a little bit bigger than the outdoor pool that we have currently.
But it could not be used for competition.
Yes, it could be used,
Well, it could be technically.
could the pool be used for competition is the
Technically,
question.
it could, but no records could be kept because you don't have a legitimate sized pool for competition.
So,
I think she's thinking in terms of
Olympic.
long course, which is 50 meters versus, but this is a short course pool, and yes, they do keep records for short course.
so we actually got
That's high school.
yeah.
Correct. It is the pool will be a legitimate high school pool, size pool.
So general question is, could it be used as a competition pool? It sounds like, and we got a phone a friend from the crowd, that it wouldn't be able to be used for things that normally would require an Olympic size or competitive. Competitive, but for things like high school, those types of activities, it can be used as a competitive pool.
Yes.
Thank you, by the way.
Do we have an estimate for the cost for phase 2?
So the question was, do we have an estimate for the cost of phase 2? We don't have an official one. The general expectation of the total project was somewhere in the ballpark of $12 to $15 million. As we identified, that was much higher than what Tabor would. We focus on that phase 1, but we haven't gotten an official estimate for that phase 2 yet. Okay. This covered a lot of our major topics here. Are there any other questions before we, I think, transition into the open?
Yeah, at this point, if you have questions, did you have a question about anything that he's gone over? Otherwise, we can open it up. At this point, we would ask you to come up to the table and have a seat and speak into the mic so that our online audience can hear the questions, and then that'll give Christian and Carol an opportunity to answer your questions.
And so this will be, essentially, you're welcome to do either or both. If you have specific questions about the open just discussion about it, feel free to ask those. If you have even feedback that you'd like to provide, whether you think, hey, I love this pool idea, I can't wait to see it come to fruition, or if you think, I absolutely hate this, I hope the board kills it as soon as possible, whatever that might be, welcome the feedback so that way we can provide it to the board. So we'll open it up. And I know, Larry, we had you, so if you want to, welcome to.
Thank you. May I stand up? I hate to sit down.
Sure.
Okay. My name's Lawrence Baer. I've been a resident of Pueblo West and homeowner for a little over 15 years. I want to see the kids have a swimming pool, even maybe an aquatic center, but I have a couple of questions, Ms. Cosby. But first, I want to ask these two young guys. Do you go swimming this summer?
Yes,
Here? Or in your own pool?
in our own pool and other public pools.
Good. I feel for them. I feel for all the kids, young adults and adults that use a swimming pool, that they were deprived of using the pool this year due to certain management, you might say, considerations. So now I'm going to ask Ms. Crosby some questions. When did you discover that the pool was unusable for this year?
Actually, we had schools at the end of the season, at the end of the school year using the pool. So for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks of school, the school year, kids were using the pool. We knew the pump was not great, but it was doing it was running the pool like it was supposed to at that time.
Okay, as I understand it, you have a Pentair 3 horsepower, 230 volt, 2-inch pump, ID and OD pipes going in? Sound similar? Okay, the replacement cost of that, which you can verify by looking up on any of the sites on the computer from professional pool installers, is approximately $2,000 to $2,500. That's for the pump. Several of you here said you had swimming pools, and several others probably know what they're like. But basically, the pump is the recirculating pump that pulls from the skim place, which up toward the top of the pool, leaves, bugs, whatever you have, back into a filter. And there's a couple, probably this one, I don't know, I only saw one. Is there 2 floor drains? That go to-
At the bottom of the pool, there are 3 floor drains.
Okay. They circulate the water in the pool. The pool needs to be circulated every 8 hours according to Pacifics. And the pool, I didn't get to measure it, is approximately, let's say 50 by 100, that's usually a little bit large. So it'd have about 188,000 gallons. A 3 horsepower pump would be sufficient or more than efficient to handle that. The pump itself, is you've got an electric motor, then you've got another pump that has an impeller in it. There's pipes coming in and out of the impeller, which is actually a pump. Those pumps last a long time if cared for properly. Now, what I have heard is the reason the pump is damaged because of gravel and sand got into it, which could only come in one way, and that's from the return filter system underneath it. Back when that pool was built, it should have had probably cast iron pipes laid underneath with maybe PVC pipe inside. We don't know, nobody knows, probably it was round. The question on that is how could that pipe break and why would it produce gravel and sand into the actual pump itself? The pool appears to be solid, about as solid as you get. I see no cracks, I see where it hasn't ever been repaired. That pipe's not going to break with the pool sitting on it. That's firm, it's not going to have any leaks. Anyway, to me, it sounds like that the pump could have very well been sabotaged, if you want to call it that, or planned to be put out of service. Because it would not, there's on the end of the pump, I forgot that there's a catch-all container, you have one on yours probably, that catches everything coming out of the pool before it goes back in. That includes earrings, rings, grass, toys, rocks, sand. So I question the viability of the statement that that pool is not usable with slight repairs. Now, at the last council meeting, Metro meeting, you stated that you got a repair bill of $700,000 to fix it?
We had a leak detection company come out who did all the lines, the return lines, as well as as far as they could on the main drains and out of the pump room. They couldn't get very far because it wouldn't go any farther because they found a pipe that was broken, yes.
Did you have that in writing? Did you get that in writing?
We have that in a report that was sent to the board with pictures.
Okay, so you're saying they ran a camera down through your 4-inch main? Is it 4-inch or 2-inch?
It's not 4-inch or 2-inch, it's 6-inch.
6-inch. So they would have used cast iron.
There's
Cast
only,
iron was used in municipal pools and city water mains for years. They don't really repair cast iron anymore. What they do is they run PVC pipe, smaller size, through it. And it's as good as any. Cities use it all the time for making their water repairs on their mains. So I asked you, when did you discover that the pool was not going to be usable this year?
that was the day before the pool was to open. when the pump and the motor went down because of all the air and stuff that was going through that. And at that time, the pool was shut down. And we investigated, actually, at that time, we made a decision as a team to close it and look how we could find what was going on. We had people come in to look at it.
That's great. When did you do this? When did you have the inspection team come out and look at it?
The pool opened on June 2nd. Probably the week of June 2nd.
June 2nd, and what time does the pool usually open?
The pool would open the next day. The pool's open Tuesday through Sunday. That's when the pool was open during the summer. Basically from 8 a.m. to almost 8 p.m. every night.
Okay. Did you think that the $700,000 figure was a little bit high?
No.
Not discovering anything? You didn't? Okay. The architect, who they paid $435,000 or $485,000 to design this pool, our aquatic center, they did a pool in, I don't know where it's at, but it's in Sundance Hills Metropolitan District. Anybody know, up by Denver somewhere? That community had a 50-year-old pool that they wanted updated. Actually, it was a 4-pool system, quite a bit larger than here, and they had estimates on repairing or replacing, updating the pool, say updating it. And their figures here, that comes from the company itself that did this, that to replace all piping, all mechanical, electrical, and plumbing accessories to their existing pool would cost a little over $400,000. So it's curious why all of a sudden that figure would jump $700,000 for this. Anyway, I have some concerns. You also mentioned you talked to, have you ever talked to any board of director or management person about the pool after it closed?
What was
In other words, as manager, you discuss with the board of directors or Metro Board of Directors that the pool would not be open and get their input?
We came to the board with that, yes. And we sat down with the district manager. That was not made by myself.
So, if I can, there's a couple things about just the history timeline and part of the decision. So, just reaching back to 53-year-old pool. At the time the pool was announced it was going to be closed, the issue was the motor had stopped running, the pump in the motor.
Right, that's what I heard too.
The first part of it was a question of, okay, if it stopped when it was supposed to have a longer lifespan and it suddenly got gravel, sand, air intake, there was suspected at that time there was a line break, and we got feedback from a contractor or somebody who provided that if we replaced that motor or pump before we fixed the line, it was likely it would only last a few weeks before we go back down again, if the issue was what was suspected.
Okay.
So at that time, we announced the closure of the pool, we informed the board of that, and we came to a public meeting at the next one to discuss
This
it.
is not the first time you've had trouble with the pump, is it, for the last bunch of years?
No.
You've replaced the pump before.
Couple years ago.
You remember what the cost was to replace that pump?
$5,000.
Okay, that must be an extensive labor. If a pump would cost like $2,500, it just mounts on a metal bracket. It's got, you hook electrical line into it, take some plumbers.
Actually, we had to order the pump out of Michigan. It had to come in and it had to fit the existing pipes that were in the pit where the pump is, and that's why the cost was so
So you say it
much.
cost $5,000?
Yes.
Do you think it would be worth $5,000 of taxpayer money to fix it this year so the kids, like these two, several young guys, could use a pool?
We would have loved to do that if that would have fixed the
You
problem.
didn't present that as an option, did you?
Yeah, we presented that as an option that Mr. Hine just said that if it would be replaced, it would probably go down in a couple weeks.
I don't see how it could go down, but because it's got that big, you got filters and it's got the catch-all bin right on the end of it. That catches all gravel and everything of any size. The filter should have caught the gravel.
So I believe the manufacturer gave us that recommendation of if you didn't fix the line and it continued to get gravel and sand, it would
Okay.
only last that. The question was, would you make it operational for a couple weeks for it to go down, have to get a new replacement, operational maybe a couple weeks later, for a couple weeks go down?
But you really
That's
don't
where
know
it came.
what caused the pump or how much debris is in the lines.
That's why we wanted to inspect it and find out more
But
before we did
it really
that.
wasn't ever expected. You didn't run a flow test on it.
That's why we contracted to get somebody to inspect the line.
Normally what they would do, they'd hook a, let's see, water comes into the facility on a city line or metro line into the pump house, and it's not filtered. Doesn't go through any filters. The only water that's filtered is what's being circulated through the pool.
So
The
we
only place it could have picked up gravel would be underneath.
Correct.
Which is where I think it was
Right,
identified.
okay,
How long do
so
we comment on things? Is there a time limit, just out of curiosity, or is
this,
this the line?
this is not a public meeting, and Robert's Rules of Order do not say, I know that you don't like what I'm
bored.
saying.
Clearly, you're
You're
a
bored?
professional, and I would encourage you to fix it for $2,500, but we're trying to figure out 5-day Tabor timeout stuff, and there's been a rant.
Okay,
about
well, the
existing
I have
rules.
information on that too, but the question I had was asked Carol Crosby. And to me, what I've seen and
You
from
asked
the
about
fight,
12 question.
or you have the floor, you can have the floor if you want.
No, I'm
Okay.
hoping other people want to get
I
on
think
this thing.
what I'm saying is,
It seems like we need a mediator to move this to the actual subject that we're here to discuss.
okay, what is it?
Somebody to move this on.
No,
A Metro Board
we're
meeting.
talking about,
somebody
right
else,
now,
some
I'm talking
other-
about
some
fixing the
other
existing
situation.
pool.
All right, we're gonna take it down a notch
A
and
different
just,
place to address this.
Okay, I'll quit here.
Like he said, we're here for the 5A, we're here for the aquatic center.
Why,
This
why
is-
is there got a pool? I don't mind it.
Because we're here for the 5A Tabor time that's being funded for the aquatic
Okay,
center.
well, I'm sorry, I have the floor
It
until
can't
he
go towards the
dismisses me.
existing
So I'm
pool, so
gonna
I think
continue
we're
to
at
ask
a
my
point
questions
we need to
not
move on.
closed. Is my feeling is the pool
With-
was not, could have been repaired, wasn't, and there may have been some, even going to the point of collusion or conspiracy to keep the pool closed so the community be forced to build a new pool.
so
Is that all
Mr.
right? That sound all right to you?
No.
Fair enough.
You don't think, you
All right,
I like to see your pool
Mr. Bayer,
fixed.
I think I understand your concern is that there was either up to a concerted effort to make sure that the pool was closed, and that way we would be pursuing this project, and there are concerns
Okay.
about that. We have had multiple opportunities where we've talked with the board
Okay,
about the process to date.
I'll leave the floor.
I appreciate your feedback. If there
But
are
I might
questions about it,
mention,
we'll move.
before you put me down for being a kook, I was mayor of this town in Kansas for 14 years. We built water plant, sewer plant, roads, streets, everything, and we kept it in the budget. We would not have tolerated anything like this, and I'm embarrassed for everybody in Pueblo West that these kids weren't able to swim in the pool. I'm all for building a pool
And
too.
I don't disagree that subject or that matter at all.
So, the Tabor money is not gonna build it.
We do appreciate the feedback, thank you, and respect that, there are folks here who have that, either questions and general feedback or questions about the 5A, so we'll actually modify a little bit of the rules. We'll ask for essentially 5 minutes as part of that conversation going forward, but we do appreciate the conversation, the discussion, and the feedback, Mr. Bayer. We'll open up for the next person. Go for it. Oh, we have a timer.
So I want to say, first, thank you. I know you have worked hard on the pool. So to explain a little background on me, I was a competitive swimmer since I was 7. And I worked as a lifeguard for a long time when I was younger. And so in Pueblo, it's been a bit disheartening to see so many of the school pools, like Centennial closed down, Pueblo East High School closed down their pool, and not having an internal inside facility for competitive swimming, for USA Swimming, which I was a member of for a long time. And so it would be nice if it's feasible, and I do see that Pueblo West High School can have it right now. County high schools having issues with their pools, so having an indoor facility and helping kids have a sport of learning to swim, being involved in competition, having adults having places to do lap swimming, I think it would be a great thing for our community, for kids. And as that facility grows, we can add gyms onto it, we can add leisure pools onto it. It could be a whole facility where it, I think, can eventually become an income producing thing. I do also have to say, pumps are far more complicated, like pump rooms for pools are far more complicated than what you're saying. I worked in those pump rooms, And it is not easy to be just like, we are going to put in a new motor, and the pumps involved in it is a lot more work. So I do think the feasibility on what she's saying on the estimate of this is probably really within reason. It is unfortunate the kids didn't have something to do this summer. My son was going to be a lifeguard over at that pool this year, and so it was a bummer. But it's also a 50-year-old pool with equipment and pumps and pipes that all need to be figured out. So eventually, maybe one day we can have that as an option, or a splash pad would be a fantastic option as well. So anyway, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyway, oh,
You're fine. So my name is Nick Holderman. I've been a resident of this community for 30 years. Grown up here, went to high school here, raising my family here. Tagging on to some of the things other people have said, I understand that the budget issues, money, how are we going to fund it, how are we going to pay for it, how are we going to run it. I brought some comparisons here. So I recently went on vacation about a month ago down to New Mexico. Carlsbad and Artesia, New Mexico, which both have aquatic center facilities. They're outdoor facilities, 3 to 5 water slides, lazy rivers, zero entry kids areas, lap pools, indoor and outdoor facilities. So Pueblo West has a population of about 35,000 with an average income of 95,000 a year. Carlsbad, 32,000 with 77,000 income, and Artesia, New Mexico has a population of 12,000 with an average income of 77,000. Pueblo West is larger and more wealthy than some of these other communities, and they have managed to build these facilities. Carlsbad, for example, built theirs in 2016 for a cost of $4.5 million, which makes me question the overall budget of this particular facility exceeding close to $10 million. What's changed? So Carlsbad has 5 water slides, lazy river, leisure pool, children's areas, large cabana, shade tents, and they built theirs for $4.5 million. So it seems like there may be some issues with the budget. Why is our facility going to cost 3 times what they could build theirs for in a community that is equal population, a little less wealthy? And Artesia, New Mexico, they have indoor and outdoor facilities, indoor lap pools, outdoor facilities with water slides, and they've got a third of our population with almost triple the poverty rate. So what's the difference? Why is ours costing so much? Are we putting all of our money into the building? Do we necessarily need the building? Or can we get by with the outdoor pools, which we already have, that we've had for 50 years, that has worked just fine? Our climate is pretty much neck and neck with both of those communities. Average temperatures in the summer, mid to high 90s with very minimal rainfall, shutting down their pools. So do we need the building to start with? Or can we put our money into the pools, into the slides, and getting that portion built, and then put the building, obviously build the locker rooms, the concessions, the reception area, but do, this prefabbed enclosure over the pools at a later time, and spend the money a little more wisely up front on the actual recreational facilities instead of the building.
Gotcha. So appreciate all the questions, feedback. I'll probably let Carol speak maybe a little bit on it. I'd be interested in seeing some of that, like Carlsbad, for the costs associated with it. I do know when we looked at some of the costs associated with other projects of either similar or most comparable that we could find, you get ranges of different costs for the total project. And a lot of it does depend on what is going into it, what is the ultimate finish, where is it located, are there any challenges towards it. I'll share that the Pueblo Aquatic Center that they've talked about, which is about I want to say almost 3 times the size, about 47,000 square foot. They estimated to be about $45 million. I think there is one that is a little bit bigger. I was trying to pull it up. I think it was Canyon City when they had a very similar situation to us. I think it's their Ichabod outdoor pool, which is about 50 plus years old. It went down. Their replacement cost for something, and I'll double check what the size was, but I think similar in scope, probably about 24,000 square foot. They were estimating $24 million for that project. So I hope nobody feels that the goal is to spend as much money possible to make the most beautiful pool, period, that could possibly be there. I think we are open to the idea of anything that can make it more cost effective. And the only thing I think I would offer is that when we're talking about an outdoor versus an indoor pool, there could be an absolute conversation about whether an outdoor pool might be preferable or whether that's the final decision. Generally, the reason steering towards indoor pool would be year-round, that we'd be able to facilitate its full use and be able to see people use it for purposes like, I think, for the schools and being able to use it for competition. A lot of that's lined there, but doesn't mean that things like other outdoor pools or other conversations are off the table completely. But I'll let her, if there's anything I missed or anything that I missed of your question, also help answer.
No, I think the whole thing was, when we looked at the pool, was to look at a facility that would be year-round.
Okay.
And that could be used during the winter months. And yes, the sun does, Pueblo West is a little unique. The wind blows quite hard out here. And that's the only, there's a lot of elements with that. But I believe that's why we looked at the indoor pool.
Okay. And you mentioned year-round school usage and stuff. Is District 70 contributing any funds to this to use or upkeep the maintenance on the pool, or are they just going to use it, abuse it, and leave it for the rest of the community to support and fix and maintain?
At this time, there's been no partnership. I think most people probably in the community are aware District 70 has its own funding challenges right now. I think that there might be conversations about what that use would look like. We had strong partnerships with District 70 historically. I think we want to see it as an overall community amenity, understanding District 70 is part of that community. But there may be conversations on what that use could look like. Will there be costs associated with it when they run competitions, or if there's stuff there? So that's open conversation.
Okay.
Fair points and fair questions, though. I appreciate the feedback. Is there anything we didn't answer?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And Christian, we've sent you quite a few online
Perfect.
messages,
Starts on my phone
questions. So are there any other questions from the audience here? Otherwise, we'll read out loud some questions. We are getting a lot of feedback online, and there's some great questions, So
the first question I have is, how many paid memberships would it take to cover sustainability costs per year? Great question. I actually don't know the answer to that. We can research a little bit of it. What we ended up looking at for our internal analysis was what was the most likely model of how much membership we would have for revenue compared to expense using that 60% return on investment. So we could probably take another look at it and just see what would it look like for that total cost to be covered by membership and be able to respond. So the next question was, I'm not sure how this even came to be on the ballot with a very poor plan on how it would be funded. I don't want to see Metro spend any more time or money on this, and an aquatic center is vastly different than a pool. Perhaps we need a new pool, not an aquatic center. We have the Y, and the Riverwalk is putting one in, so PW does not need one. So as far as, I can't speak to why it was originally put on the ballot. I do know that the board would have made that decision to refer it. I do think that it did align with the idea that we did have an old outdoor pool. I don't think it was concrete whether they were just looking at an aquatic center, if they were looking at a community pool. Two things, one thing. So the original concept and the funding for it, it's a great question. I don't have the answer to. As far as whether it's an aquatic center or a pool or just a new pool, that is why phase one is looked at as an indoor pool, as we discussed, potentially just seeing it as a year-round pool. It would look at it as potentially either replacing or in addition to what exists as that outdoor pool, which would be a conversation with our board. And I can't speak to the Y or the Riverwalk. I do know that the city of Pueblo and overall Pueblo County have discussed their own aquatic facility. It does appear from the last update that there are funding challenges with that, so we haven't heard progress if they're going to move forward with it. And some of these might be comments / questions. Next one was, take the $10 million, donate to the YMCA on behalf of Pueblo West for lifetime membership for Pueblo West residents to use the YMCA pool facilities. Appreciate the feedback. When it comes to conversations about that, I think we can have open conversations with partners about it. I do think that right now our goal, having a Parks and Recreation Department, is to be able to provide a service to the community and amenity to the community. The next one is, the younger generation needs things to do here in Pueblo West. The aquatic center would be a great investment and give them something to do. I don't understand why PW doesn't have more things for our youth. Fair point. I do know historically our parks and recreation programs have been limited. As I identified earlier, there have been either sustainability or funding challenges for the district in the past. I do think when we're talking about master planning our operational services, which is part of our service plan, and looking at parks and seeing now that there is that funding available for parks projects, that we are dedicating a lot more to that to make sure that they have the ability, at least from our amenities, to do, and we are encouraging when there are folks on the private side who are looking for it, trying to support or at least work with them to see those amenities come to Pueblo West. Okay. Next comment, I'm interpreting a little bit, I apologize. I don't think people realize what a benefit this will do to our community. The local high school has a boys and girls swim team that have to drive 30 minutes to county to even swim. Swim meets can be held here, events can be held here, the elderly can have their lap times. Blows my mind how people are so close-minded about this. The YMCA cannot and will not do what the Aquatic Center will do. And telling our local families to just go swim in town. Have you guys gone to those pools and seen how overpacked they are? Seek first to understand before making these comments. This pool is highly needed for our youth, the future, and our elderly. Appreciate the feedback. I know there is a lot of information and a lot of opinions that come with a lot of this. So understand there are people on either side discussing it. I know we heard from folks who, whether they themselves would have appreciated it when they were in competitive swimming, whether recognizing that the situations have changed with the availability of those types of pools elsewhere. We appreciate that there is some recognition that this is intended to be that amenity and hopefully support some of those types of activities in the future for youth and future generations and our elderly. Question is there room in phase 1 pool for bleachers to have competitive swimming? I know that there was discussion of the phase 2 with funding plans. How long are we thinking it would take to get to phase 2? Maybe funds for phase 2 could be applied towards fixing the outdoor pool. Great questions. I think the bleachers are there.
The bleachers are in phase 1.
Okay. I know that there was discussion of the phase 2 with funding plans. How long are we thinking to get to phase 2? Also a great question. Looking at our sustainability and seeing our models, it has brought up a question of would we feasibly be ready to do phase 2 at the same time as phase 1? One thing I did forgot to mention when it comes to the timing of the construction of phase 1 or phase 1 and 2, the ballot initiative to secure the fire department funding permanency is something we are tabling for November of 2026. We aren't waiting until it expires to do that. The goal is if it is secure, it allows us to move forward with other projects. So if that is, then 2027 on would give us freedom to be able to actually see projects like these constructed. There have been conversations about doing that either later or earlier based on especially the outdoor pool being out of service. So things are still on the table, but we don't want to be in that situation where there's uncertainty with the funding and the sustainability. So with what we're seeing within the general funds fund balance, the capital project fund, and how much is raised, there is a serious question that can come up about potentially doing the complete project at the same time. And then maybe funds for phase 2 could be applied towards fixing the outdoor pool. I think is a valid question. If we postpone phase 2 and the intent was to either maintain the outdoor pool in addition to the indoor pool or turn it into an outdoor splash pad, those things could be prioritized ahead of the phase 2 as well. And they could be conversations for our board. So I appreciate the feedback. Oh boy. This is a long one. Wait, I think this is the same one.
That's the same one.
Am I going in circles?
I don't know. I'm trying to look.
I think it was an edit.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it was an
Gotcha.
edit, the
It
last
was an
one?
edit, yeah, just to make sure that.
Next question is short-term plan for getting the current pool operational. That should be priority to prove the current can even get operational. That should be in the works now for next summer, not the week prior to opening. Fair feedback. I think something that we will identify is cost for the outdoor pool and the timing for this indoor pool and figure and determine what is the priority. Do we bring the outdoor pool and try to get it online as quickly as possible to not have another summer where there's no pool versus is that funding needed for the indoor pool or the full total project? So it's fair feedback and question. And it'll be a decision for our board. This one I believe is a comment. An aquatic center in our community would greatly benefit every age and ability. The swim teams locally need a place to swim, and there are neighboring communities who would be avenues of revenue for renting for the competitive swimmers. A swim meet is a multi-layered benefit to the financial aspects of our community, from hotel rentals, food, and gas. Next comment, an aquatic center is an investment in the health of our Villa Pueblo senior living community. And someone pointed out 34% increase in cost of living in Colorado since 2016. Is that it? I think that's all I got.
You get one more.
Okay. Stand by. Okay.
you
Yep.
get the one about the commission?
Yes.
Okay.
So next one is, thank you, Christian. Sounds like the phase one plans make the most sense, expanding later as money allows. And next question is, and I appreciate the feedback. Next question is there a commission related to this aquatic center? If not, is that an option to create one to try and help move the dial forward or explore feasibility further? Great question. There was a committee that was, I don't know when it started. I think it stopped around 2023. The purpose of that committee was really identifying any other funding and revenue, and I think highlighting some of the project plans and providing feedback, which would ultimately go to the board for approval, particularly at a time where there were funding challenges. At one point in 2023, we did have conversations about seeking partners, whether it was District 70 or whether it was the YMCA, whether it was a private corporation to help fund either the full project. At the time, especially with how far away we were from final funding goals, I don't think we found a lot of folks who were willing to be able to partner or donate towards it. Being several, $5+ million off from our project goals made it a little bit challenging to seek good partners for that, just because that is a pretty high capital investment up front for them on that side. So we did explore those models. I think the Aquatic Center committee got disbanded or discontinued as we move forward, now that we do have the funding, and now these proposals, concepts, final approvals, and plans are going to the board of directors for finalization based on that. Not to say we can't have further discussions about whether a commission or a committee could take place or be stood up at the board's pleasure. And is that the last one, or is there one more? I think I got one more. Okay.
There should be one more.
The voters wanted the enclosed aquatic center. That is why this passed. Stop talking and get to building the indoor aquatic center. Let's give this community the amenities people deserve. Do not put any more money into the old pool this time. And additional comment from the same. The old pool was not part of the aquatic center funding. So appreciate the feedback. When it came to that ballot language we read, that is the limitation. It does say community pool and aquatic facility. I'll double check, say, is that facility?
I believe that's what it was, yes.
So it does say the excess revenue over said limits for the sole purpose of funding the design, construction, maintenance, or lease of a community pool and aquatic facility. That is what we are limited to. I do think still, as far as our strategic plan and the board, which is board approved, and where direction it thus far has been from the board, or at least in the conversations has not changed, is still moving forward with that as part of our strategic plan. And we're talking first and foremost about phase one. With the outdoor pool going out, there has been new conversation about what do we do, knowing that circumstance exists as well, but definitely appreciate the feedback. Okay, I'll open back up. Are there any questions from the group or any comments or feedback?
I have two other questions, one for you, Christian.
Sure.
You mentioned the fire department funding. Is that the 6A tax that you're talking about?
Yes.
Going back on the ballot next year?
Yes.
To become a permanent thing?
So the question is, was the fire department funding permanency the 6A 1% fire sales tax? Answer is yes, and part of that, as far as the timing, that's the one that we are looking right now to put on the November 2026 ballot. It will go to the board for final approval or to move that forward, but that is the plan right now.
Okay. And the second one for Carol, I just had a question on the transparency thing off the ClearGov site for you guys. The RFP was posted in 2021, but the site selection and soil testing stuff came before the board of directors in June of this year. Is there a reason that it took 9 years? What was the holdup on getting the site selected, soil testing, and shouldn't the site have been selected before we put out a request for proposal?
Actually, there was a site. There was a site selected. It was on Spalding. It was one of the 5 that were the option given to the board. As the board has changed over the years, the site has been changed also. So that's where we brought the 5 sites to them. The design was designed.
So it was the site before it went out?
Yes, that's where the design was made for that site.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great question. We forgot to cover that.
Sorry, we didn't cover that one.
Okay. Was there any other holdup, like, between that time from that original site and now, 9 years from the time we approved it, as far as selecting another site?
Funding, essentially. So
That's-
at the time of, I think that 2021 is about when we had enough funding collected thus far to go out to design it. Once we went out there, the site selection and everything that took place, and then recognizing between probably 2021 till now, it was a question of getting that design cost understanding the total construction cost that was at least estimated at the time, it was unlikely we had the funding for it, so it kind of got postponed as we were looking for either partners or some way to fund the rest of it.
And I know you referenced the 9 years. Yes, in 2016 it was passed, but actually no funds came in till 2020, 2021. So
Right.
it took a while to get those Tabor funds in before we could do anything.
Okay, what timeline are we looking at now that, you know, some of those funds are there, the phase one selecting, like what timeline are we looking at for the board to approve the site and get started on phase one?
Well, the soil samples are very important in doing that, and we are working on that. Hopefully, we can get some on board here this month, and then taking it back to the board for what their decision is on the final site.
And then just to share.
And then construction after
Yeah.
that.
Timeline for construction, I think when we get to a point of talking with our board, particularly about the outdoor pool, there might be some changes, and it is going to be a final board determination. I think right now what makes the most sense and what we might end up recommending at the very least is waiting until 2027. That way we have surety of 6A being permanent and then starting that construction. And we aren't really worried about the funding at this time, at least for the phase one project. If something came up about wanting to do the entire project, it may be a question of, do we provide more of our fund balance from general fund to do it? Is there more funding needed, whether by loan or anything else, whether it's a sales tax or any type of thing for that? But reasonably, we would be ready essentially next year to start the project. The question is, do we want to do it before 6A?
I was just gonna say, because the concern is if 6A doesn't
Yeah.
pass, there won't be money to make up the difference should the facility not self-fund.
Yeah, so, and I'll probably paint the picture here. The worst case scenario, if we move too fast when it comes to the aquatic center or the indoor pool and 6A isn't secured, is we incur essentially a $3 million deficit within the general fund. And now we have a fire station 2 that's hard to operate. We have an aquatic center that's hard to operate, and we have to make those cuts. And I think we would be all remiss if we had facilities out there that were supposed to serve the public that had to be closed down after multiple years. So that's the worst case scenario that we have been concerned about and why the strategic priorities lay out that way. But great questions.
So a suggestion from my end, I know 6A was on the ballot twice before it passed.
I believe so.
It failed the first time,
It
passed
did.
the second time,
Yes.
I believe. From my perspective, the first time it didn't pass, there was not enough information put out on it. And the fire department, they were out there, gunning for it, getting information out there, but they kind of started a little too late. The second time when it passed, they were definitely out getting more information out. So I think from your guys' perspective, from the fire department's perspective, a lot of information needs to be put out about that. This is the call volume, especially with Fire Station 2. I'm 2 miles, a mile and a half from there, great asset to that side of the community. So we need the information for that. Here's what they're serving, here's their calls for service, response times, things like that. And kind of a detailed breakdown like, hey, this is what 6A has gotten you guys, and this is what you're gonna lose if it doesn't pass and become permanent. So I think a lot more effort needs to be put into that so that we can make sure that that does pass.
Yeah, absolutely.
That for this community is a huge asset, north side, west side.
Yeah, absolutely great feedback. So to summarize, the fire sales tax went on the ballot twice. It was the second time it passed. First time it was limited on information. The second time there's much stronger information campaign. And that was a lesson learned for both that and even when 6C went, the question of was it too quick, 6C being the road sales tax, it had failed multiple times prior, either due to not enough information or in some cases not enough certainty. One of the other lessons we learned both with 6A and 6C is an oversight committee from the citizens to review those expenses to make sure they go for those specific purposes was another lesson learned. So we've talked with an outside consultant just to get feedback, no cost to the district, just to say what time frame would it look like when we start the information campaign. He's given us feedback that we're ahead of the game if we're going in November 2026. One of his big concerns is if you do it too early, then you may lose the narrative over the time. So I think it's going to be something we start early next year, but appreciate the feedback.
Christian, could you explain in regards to your questions about the aquatic centers down in Mexico, the difference in the challenges that a metro district has as opposed to incorporated city and our funding challenges that face us?
Sure. So had a question about explaining the difference between metropolitan districts or special districts and the funding challenges they have compared to municipalities or incorporated cities, particularly around revenue when it comes to the ability to fund big projects, where Pueblo West is more affluent than a lot of its either neighbors or maybe in comparison to some cities. One of the challenges that service special districts and metropolitan districts, which are just a type of special district providing more services than just one, is that we are not considered a municipality. We're not considered available for certain, one, funding like grants when it comes to all the way to the federal. Two, when it comes to things like a general sales tax, that's off the table for things like a metropolitan district. We're really limited, especially if you go back probably 10 years or so. Sales tax was barely even on the ability for a metropolitan district to be able to put that forward. So we were very limited to things like just property tax in our general revenue. So despite maybe having a more affluent community, maybe having the ability to appear like we would be more fortunate to be able to fund major projects like that, the actual revenue going into metropolitan or a special district is much more limited because their goal is only to provide the services that are generally in their service plan. They have very specific requirements based on Title 32, which is the Colorado Revised Statutes, on what they can do, and they have limitations all the way up to the federal level of what funding they can even access or even go to the voters to approve for. Some of that has changed over time. For instance, legislation went forward, I forget what year, if it was 2016 or 13.
I think it's about 4 years ago.
For the fire in the streets and roads. So legislation went forward within the, let's say, last 10 years, where we were allowed to levy a sales tax, voter-approved sales tax, for specific purposes. And that's where we get things like 6A, the fire sales tax. So we could go to the voters for that or for the road, but we can't do it for general. More recently, they added Parks and Rec to that list as another thing that we could go for. But really, when it comes to the available funding, the available land use, the available revenue, economic incentives, things that can be used sometimes to be able to develop something like a city or attract more revenue towards it, special districts are often limited towards it. Is there anything that you're thinking I missed?
And how much the tax that we pay, your property tax, how much Pueblo West gets on that?
Perfect. So the question was how much of our property tax bill, if you live in Pueblo West, comes back to Pueblo West. We have about, in total, if you live in Pueblo West, 98 mills. These are rough numbers. Only about 20 of those mills come back to Pueblo West. The other about 70 mills go from everything from Pueblo County to the Library District, I believe Conservancy districts. A lot of those, I think it's about 40 for the school district. For District 70, I think it's 30 for Pueblo County, and it's about 20 for us. So if you pay, $1,000 on your property tax bill, essentially $200 of that is coming back to Pueblo West.
You were talking about the fire sales tax that was appropriated by the state specifically for a project. Don't we also have a new bill that Parks and Rec can do the same thing?
Yes, so.
It's available now.
Yes, the state
You
legislation.
have to go to the taxpayers and say, do you want to have another 1% or 1.5%? And the gentleman over here close to that. If you'll go back and watch some of the videos of past board meetings, I proposed to do that as a board member. And it was shot down so quick because the board only takes 3 people to make any decision they want that we have to live with. And at that time, the aquatic center and the sales tax for recreation or a pool or anything was not a priority that 3 people on the board wanted. So it's all politics. There's money there if the board wants to allocate it toward whatever they choose to be their priority.
So, member brought up that, yes, Parks and as far as an addition for what sales tax a metropolitan district can levy. In the recent years, Parks and Rec got added to that list. It was a bill that actually we were a proponent of to bring on. Carol worked with our lobbyists and the representatives, so that got added in addition to, I think it's fire, road, safety, and there might be another one that was the original. Parks and Rec got added to that. And to the members' point that when it comes to elections, they do have consequences. There are 5 board members who are on a board as the Metropolitan District of us have, and you can have 3 that make a quorum who can make decisions on that. I do recall that a conversation came up about potentially levying a sales tax for Parks and Rec. At the time, the board decided not to move forward with that. I'll go there quick.
One last statement and then I'll make it short. I agree with the gentleman on the left that it's all about funding. I've got off my chest about the existing pool, but to build an aquatic center as a community deserves, you need to get your funding in, and if they would have explained 6C differently and had an actual kind of campaign out saying where the funding was going to come to, I think it could have passed. And I'll go out and roll a limb here, without you hanging me, is that I'd like to see, instead of giving a percent to the fire department, that's can't meet its expenses, just put a 1% in for a Parks and Recreation Aquatic Center. And if presented properly, I think it would pass. Then you'd have not only the cost to build it, but the cost to maintain it and operate it throughout the years.
Gotcha. Appreciate the feedback.
Do we know how many people are online listening tonight?
There's a maximum of 28. Currently
28?
at this time, there's 18.
Okay. Question came up about how many people are online. There's been a maximum of 28 viewing and currently 18.
See, I think that's part of the problem. I personally am pretty neutral about whether we have a pool or not. Because of my age, I'm not going to be using it that much. But if I were 50 years younger and had young kids, I'd be beating my drum to have an aquatic center or some kind of pool that I could use year-round. This meeting is devoted entirely to the aquatic center, but this topic has come up at a number of other meetings that I've been to, and there probably haven't been total of 100 people at those meetings that I've been to. So it doesn't seem like the people in Pueblo West give a diddly squat about whether they have a pool or not.
That's true.
Because they're not doing anything about it, they're not coming to these meetings, they're not creating any kind of a ruckus about it. So, I mean, my assumption is that they don't care, and so what happens is what Joe has just mentioned, the board is not going to vote for it if it doesn't seem like the people want it. So I don't know what the answer is to that, but I think that's the biggest problem.
Okay, so a bit of the feedback, I think as far as a concern about the total amount of people we see, even across the year, coming to meetings, whether in person, virtual, sometimes limited, maybe about 100 within this specific topic, and that may be difficult for a board to take just that and the feedback you'll get from those 100 folks and determine what direction they'd want to go forward for. I think the technical term was that they may not give a diddly squat on whether they care or not.
That's an important term.
That's
Don't
fair.
forget it.
So understanding that does make it difficult for whether elected officials or administration to be able to say, this is what we think the community wants. I do know we try to reach out, whether it's public surveys, newsletters, we do get feedback from folks all throughout the year when it comes to either just public comments or just sharing stuff with staff. So it's never to say that we have a true version or vision of exactly the 35,000 people who live here, exactly what they want. So it does become difficult, but I do think that we try to make sure that we're sharing pretty openly what's happened, where we're at, why we're moving the directions we are, and invite feedback for it. So at any point, we're open to that feedback and the public's input for it. And I do know that at the very least when it comes to, I know some of our members would talk about this, when the elections do come up and when we have people running for it, the participation in those elections does seal who you'll see on that board and how they will interact when it comes to giving guidance to staff in the district.
I mean, I'm not blaming the board or anybody else. I'm just saying that people don't seem to care,
Yeah.
especially the young people. I mean, look around this district. Look at the, I mean, there are some young people here, but there are more older people than there are young people here with kids. I mean, same way with the regular board meetings or any of these other meetings that you've had throughout the year.
Appreciate the feedback. We're getting close to the end. I do know I had one gentleman for a question or a comment.
So many times at different meetings, this one included, they talk about 35,000 people. Half those people are little kids. So they're not adults. So we need to bring that number down to what the actual people that are voting.
Sure. So we got, sorry, go ahead.
Because that's kind of a misrepresentation.
So got feedback, 35,000 residents does include children who are not obviously at voting age. I would just encourage, we do think of the entire community when we're talking about them, but to your point, when it comes to the folks who will come forward, vote, or provide opinion, that is a much probably smaller number. I think we have about 12 or 13,000 households within the district, so that's probably a more accurate representation of what we probably see as far as the participants when it comes to votes. Or the available participants, not the actual participants.
How many registered voters do we have?
Question was, how many registered voters do we have? I do not know the answer off the top of my head.
It's right around 14,000.
14,000? Okay. That makes sense.
How many of those voted in the last election?
Oh, not a lot. 2,000, 3,000, 4?
4,800 ballots were returned, so.
That sounds right. So, questions and comments came from how many registered electors do we have within Pueblo West? It's about 14,000 is the general figure, and out of the last election, about 4,000 return ballots. Go ahead.
Can the Metro District receive donations earmarked for particular projects like this? Is there any, like, method of that?
So the question was, can the district receive donations earmarked for something like this project? The answer is yes. There are ways to be able to provide funding for it. We have not opened essentially a donation fund, small dollar donation fund for this. I think when we've talked about projects for large partners, that's come up for it. So it could be a conversation that we have if people were interested in donating, what that could look like. We don't have currently a specific setup for that, but if somebody were to come forward and say, hey, I'd like to donate however much money for it, we would be able to attribute that or appropriate it specifically for the project.
So people who are very ambitious about this could write checks, collect checks, and make it happen today if they would. If the Metro could receive that and do with it this specific project.
We could receive funds, we could donate or appropriate them for specific use if people were ambitious. Okay, we're at 1 minute over, so I was going to close this out. A couple of us will probably just stick around in case there's any small questions or conversation we can have. We really appreciate everybody's time, whether you're online or in person. I appreciate the spirit of discussion. Anytime you have any questions, we're always available, happy to answer, and I hope that this was informative and hope you all have a good and safe night.
Thank you.